I had goosebumps when I heard her voice for the first time.
Wow.
Well, to me, for the second time, because
Mm-hmm.
I obviously heard it for 9 months and I recognized her voice. It was like I heard this voice before. That is the feeling that I got.
Who am I?
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 Who am I? This is Who Am I, Really? A podcast about adoptees that have located and connected with their biological family members. I'm Damon Davis, and today you're going to meet Andrie, who called me from Duluth, Georgia. When Andrie learned she was adopted, she started coping with the rejection she felt by making up stories about her birth parents, a habit that carried into adulthood. Searching for her truth, Andrie found her birth father, but has chosen to distance herself from him. When she met her birth mother, Andrie found a woman she has a lot in common with and whom she says she absolutely loves. This is Andrie's journey. When Andrie and I first started chatting, she took a moment to share her condolences for the loss of my adoptive mother, Veronica. She had seen my Instagram post about her passing and gently comforted me at that emotional time. It was a really kind-hearted moment that led to an interesting conversation about reunion and loss.
I want to start off by saying I'm very sorry to hear about your mom.
Oh, you're sweet.
Um,
Thank you.
Yeah, I saw your Instagram post about that, and I cannot imagine going through that, and even having your birth mother pass away, and then now your mother who adopted you. That has to be a lot to deal
Yeah.
with. I
Thank you.
can't.
That's really
Yeah,
thoughtful of you, and I appreciate
yeah.
it. And, one of the things that I think is challenging in adoption and loss is that I've lost my birth mother, whom I only knew for
hmm
6 years. And
Right,
then, I lost my adoptive father, and then I lost
right,
my adoptive mother. That's three parents whom I've
right,
had great relationships with.
right,
So,
right.
I know my
Yeah,
birth father as well, and eventually his day will also come. So, with
right,
reunion comes the eventuality of more loss. And it's just an
right,
interesting thing to sort of
right.
contemplate losing four parents
Yes,
instead of two. But thank you for
right.
your words. I appreciate that so much.
I have all four right now. I
Mm-hmm.
know my parents who adopted me, my biological mother and my biological father, and I cannot imagine losing any of them
Yeah.
right now. Not so much my biological father, but that's a whole nother story.
Oh, I bet it is. I can't wait to get into that piece. We're going to uncover what it is
Yeah.
that was wrapped in. So, obviously, Andrie has some feelings about her relationship with her birth father, which we'll definitely get to later. But for now, I'm going to take us back to Andrie's beginning. Andrie was adopted as an infant, and she had a normal life in Rockford, Illinois. She said when she went to school, the children said she had to be adopted.
I didn't even realize I was adopted until went to school. And I really didn't even know that. The kids in the neighborhood was telling me that I was adopted. I had to be adopted because I looked nothing like my parents. I am of mixed race. I had all this long curly hair, and my parents was black. And but I looked almost like I was white because that's how fair my skin was at the time. And kids just said you have to be adopted. That's not your mom and dad. And I remember when I was 7 years old is when my mother told me I was adopted. I was outside playing in the front yard, and my mom was sitting on the porch watching me play, and she told me that she had to tell me something. And I was like, "Oh, what did you have to tell me?" And that's when she told me that I was adopted. And I remember at a young age for the first time, feeling rejected and feeling the abandonment. or feeling like in my 7-year-old head, thinking somebody did not want me. And I remember feeling that empty feeling at 7 years old. To give you a little bit more background, I was adopted at 2 days old. 2 years later, my mom adopted another child, my brother. And then 4 years after that, they had a child, my sister. My mother went through a lot of miscarriages before she adopted me. She also was actually 5 months pregnant with a child, and while she was in the process of adopting me, but then that child was stillborn. So my mother went through a lot of loss before adopting me and while adopting me. And so, but before she told me that I was adopted, like I said, I didn't feel any different because my parents didn't treat us any different. When my sister was born, I remember my sister was born early. She was in the hospital in NICU for some years. And I remember every time we would go visit my sister, my mother would dress us up in like our Sunday's best, where I had all the Sunday dresses, and my brother was always in his best, and we would go see my sister. And my mother kept us very involved in that process. And then when my sister came home, I mean, we were really involved. And we had normal dysfunctions like many families have. I mean, there was arguments in the house with my mom and dad, and my dad was an alcoholic, still is an alcoholic. So we had, normal dysfunctions like any normal family would.
Yeah.
But I could tell you one thing, there was always and still is love in the family. My mother is the one that taught me how to love unconditionally because she displayed that every single day. My dad never really even talked about the adoption. He, even to this day, he barely talks about it. And it's not that he doesn't want to talk about it. He just sees me and my brother as his children. And that's how we always felt we're their natural born children, and my mother, when she told me, she didn't want to talk about it anymore after that. Her feeling was, you're my kids, you're my babies. And that's how she treated us. Like we were her children. But unfortunately, when you're adopted and you find out you're adopted, you have all these questions. And over the years, I had a lot of questions, and every once in a while I would ask her questions, and she would give me the best answer that she could give me. But it was not much after that because she just didn't want to talk about it.
On the day Andrie's mom told her she was adopted, she started to feel that first twinge of rejection. Andrie asked her mother what she was supposed to tell the children at school, who could clearly see she was not biologically related to her family, about the confirmation that she is adopted. Her mom joked that she should tell the other kids she was the milkman's baby. So she did. But Andrie said telling that story started her off creating other fabrications of her origin story. Andrie had very long hair, and other kids thought she was Native American. So she went with it and told the children she was Native American. One time, she created a story that she was born in the south of France and her birth father owned a vineyard. Creating alternate storylines for herself was Andrie's way of masking her feelings.
I literally made these stories up. Later, I realized that it was my way of coping because I pushed these feelings down when I was growing up. I didn't want to deal with it. There were times when I thought about it, and then my dad was very strict growing up. I couldn't barely date. I couldn't go to parties. I couldn't do the things that other kids were doing. And I would think to myself, why was I adopted in this family? I have to live this is the worst, But then I would imagine something else, and it would just block the feelings that I was having, the feelings of abandonment and the rejection. Just, it was my way of coping with all of that.
Yeah. The
Um,
storytelling was a coping mechanism. That makes a lot of sense. Wow.
yeah, yeah, it was. And I actually took that into my marriage, which was not healthy. And 10 years into my marriage, I realized what I was. I told these stories so much that I believed them. Like, I
Mhm.
really believed them. And I realized 10 years into my marriage that this is not healthy. This is not healthy at all. And the funny thing is my husband knew that I was lying, and he was just waiting for me to tell him the truth. And then I finally had to tell him the truth. Like, and I would start telling little truths, like, no, that didn't happen. No, this didn't happen. And that's when I started realizing I really didn't know who I was. I had made these stories up and created this life of that was not even the truth. And I had to start figuring out who I was. And that was when I started that journey of learning my identity, of
Mhm.
who I am as a person.
I want to just jump in for a few things. One,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's amazing that you got that kind of unconditional love that you did from
Uh-huh.
your parents. That is so
Mm-hmm.
powerful, and not every adopted person gets that. Hell, not every child
Mm-hmm.
gets that, to be quite honest with you.
Right. Yeah.
So that is a special foundational space that you were lucky to be in. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad that you said it with the reverence that you did. It pays homage to
Right.
your parents loving you. And I think that that's really awesome. I'm interested in the storytelling in your marriage. Was it specific to your childhood and your adoption, or did it bleed into other identity things in terms of your
Both.
storytelling?
Both.
Mm-hmm.
Both. It was specific to my adoption. It was, yeah, it was, like I said earlier, when I was telling these stories, these are the stories that I believed. I mean, I believed that this was my story. And so when I met my husband, I was on that last story of I was born in the south of France, and this is a whole elaborate story. And it became a part of me. Like, it was a part of who I was at the time. And as I got older, I became more aware that I really didn't even know who I was. Like, I had no idea. And that was not healthy to be in a marriage. Now, there were some key things about me. Like, I'm a very loving person. I'm very doting. We were we were raising my brother's children, my two nephews at the time. My husband and I had took them in, and we raised them, and I was definitely trying my best to be the best mother that I could be. And I remember them boys not to lie and to tell the truth. And then that's when it hit me. How can I teach them this and I'm not exercising that same value? So I had to, this is when I really realized I can't be a hypocrite. And then I realized I didn't know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea who I was as an individual.
That's really
Um,
fascinating.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so I went on a journey and started to celebrate the things that I did know about myself, but also start to learn some new things about myself that I actually really enjoyed and really liked about myself. And that's when I started like telling the truth, like telling my truth. It's so funny. My therapist and I, we talk about, this is my theme, speaking my truth and telling my truth. And now sometimes I'm a little too truthful.
It's funny how the pendulum swings the other way. You're like so
Right.
brutally honest, and it's people are like,
Right.
"Whoa."
Right, exactly. And even during the reunion with my biological parents, I there were times I had to either not say anything or I just had to tell the truth of how I was feeling. And I'm pretty honest about my feelings, so
Mm.
and how I feel about all of this. It's this is by doing that is helping me cope better with the fact that I was adopted,
Mm.
and if helping me to cope with the abandonment and the rejection, because this is one of the things I tell my therapist. I feel like that feeling never goes away,
Hmm.
because it comes up in other relationships where especially if I get to know a person and I really like that person, I have some type of insecurity that I don't want to lose that friendship or lose some type of connection with that person. But one thing I do not do anymore is I don't lie about anything. I'm just very honest, but I do certain little things that shows the insecurity that I don't want to lose that friend or don't want to
Hmm.
lose that. Yeah.
I can't help
And
thinking as you're describing this that one, it is probably pretty prevalent. As a matter of fact, I know it's prevalent because I've heard more than one adoptee speak of their abandonment issues. But I can't help thinking
mhm,
about, as we've already said, the pendulum swinging the other way. The idea that there are probably some people out there who have attachment issues that don't want to
mhm,
be close to anybody,
right.
and maybe tell themselves that they don't need anybody, and they push everybody away and are not interested in relationships, and say I didn't need that relationship anyway. So I would imagine there are
Right.
two very strong opposing ends to the same spectrum of
Oh,
wanting
yes.
relationships, wanting to be connected versus pushing everybody away
Right.
because you don't want to experience any of that.
Right.
That's really
Yeah.
fascinating.
And
Yeah.
it- and I think it also plays into my personality because I'm a people person and I love people.
Mm-hmm.
People give me energy. I'm extroverted. So
Mm-hmm.
I can be the the social butterfly in the room, and I'm interested in everybody that's in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So that plays a part. That's part of my personality. So that's where some of the attachment things come into play, is because once I get to know somebody and I really like that person, I don't want to lose that person.
Yeah.
And I find myself saying in silly situations, I just got to know you. I don't want to lose you. I find myself saying that.
Yep.
And it's yeah, and it's like, but what I don't do any longer is I don't do the things that I did in the past to try to keep the friendship.
Mm.
The
Mm-hmm.
insecurity shows up in different ways by me saying certain things, or but not by action, because I've learned that everybody's not meant to be your friend. Everybody's not meant to be in your life. Some people will come for a season and some people will be there for the rest of your life, and I've gotten better dealing with that.
Andrie said she's gotten much better about dealing with her feelings since her reunion when Pandora's box was opened and she was forced to confront the truth of her story and her feelings about what she had learned. Andrie admitted that her journey began with introspection, overcoming her propensity to tell herself and others false stories. She started with self-discovery before trying to locate her family of origin. Andrie was busy being a mother to her nephews, a wife to her husband, and she had re-enrolled in school later in life to get her college degree. She said another coping mechanism of hers was,
When people ask me, aren't you curious? I would be like, well, if my biological parents haven't found me by now, they don't want to know who I am. And that was my way of coping, my way of still coping with the fact that I was adopted.
but when Andrie graduated from school and started her career, she was alone after a divorce and life started to slow down. As Andrie made new friends in her life, they would ask her what her nationality was, but she had no idea. At least, she had begun to tell the truth that she didn't know instead of making something up. One friend would make suggestions about her heritage, but nothing resonated with Andrie. 3 years ago, Andrie learned that Ancestry DNA was a good way to learn what your nationality is, and that some adoptees had found their birth parents on the platform. So Andrie submitted her sample, got her results, and decided she wanted to share her findings with her friends.
I did this in a really beautiful way. I actually had an ethnic reveal party with my closest friends,
Wow.
and I cooked some of the foods from the higher percentage of where I came from. And then I revealed it to my friends of what my nationalities were. And
That is so
I
creative. That's really cool. Wow.
yeah, I wanted to celebrate because at the time I knew that I was going to see all these family connections, but I also wanted to celebrate the fact that this is a part of my identity that I did not know. And now I'm discovering this identity of myself. And and I was excited about it. I was really, really, and it still is excited about it.
Yeah.
And so
Because, it's a piece
I
of
would get
yourself that you've never known, that people have been guessing about, and now you and only you have the answers, right? That's really
right,
awesome.
right,
Cool.
exactly. So what I cooked was I cooked some foods from the UK
Mm-hmm.
and some foods from Africa. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm 45% West African, and you know the story behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm 55% Northwestern European with a big influence of Norwegian, Norway.
That's amazing.
So that's where when my life slowed down and me wanting to find out what my nationality was and what my ethnic background was, that's when the search began.
But before Andrie did the Ancestry DNA test, she did a little research of her own. Andrie examined her birth certificate, which revealed the name of the hospital where she was born in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. When she pulled up the facility's address on Google Maps, she didn't see a hospital facility. Andrie saw condominiums. Further research revealed the address was previously associated with a Booth Memorial Home for Unwed Mothers. Learning that fact corroborated something her adoptive mother had told her about her birth mother, that the woman was very young when Andrie was born. The pieces of her story were starting to materialize, slowly. Andrie told me she learned that Wisconsin had passed a law that anyone who had a closed adoption could receive their birth certificate, but only if their birth mother had also signed for permission for that access to be granted. Andrie assumed that her birth mother would not have signed for her permission. So, in Andrie's Ancestry DNA, she found a link to some second cousins and sent messages about the fact that she was searching for her biological family.
Long story short, this is how I found my biological father. I found him first. I
Wow.
found an aunt who lived in my hometown where I grew up at in Illinois. And come to find out that one of the aunts made my green beans at my wedding.
Really?
Yes, this is like,
Is she in a catering
yes.
business or something?
No, I was a hairstylist at the time, and she would come and get her hair done by the other girl that worked in the same salon that I worked at. And we all became very, very friendly, and we would talk. And I remember this particular aunt. Well, I didn't know that she was my aunt. I just thought it was somebody I knew. She was very nice to me, just would talk to me, and we had like different potlucks and different things. And then she made these green beans that were amazing. And then when I was getting married, I asked her, "Will you make the green beans for my wedding?" And she
Oh my
said, "Sure,
gosh.
absolutely."
Are you serious? That is crazy.
Yes.
Wow. Of all the weird things, one, that you asked her to
Yes,
cook at your wedding, but two, that it was just green beans. Like, it's so
right.
mad random. That's crazy.
Yes, yes. And then I found out people I went to high school with, they were my cousins. I haven't really made any connections with them. Like, I know them and we know each other, but I haven't called them up and said, "You're my cousin." There was only the aunt who had a daughter. She was the only one that I
Mm,
actually talked to,
mm,
and she, because of my this biological aunt telling her, can you believe Andrie is your cousin, your
mm,
first cousin?
mm, mm.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah. People
Unreal.
I know, people I went to church with
Hmm.
were cousins of mine.
Connecting with her birth father was a whole different story. Andrie had found her paternal aunts, and they had brothers, one of whom they thought for sure was her birth father. The man had passed away in 2019, so Andrie would never meet him, but it turned out he wasn't the right person. There was another brother who lived in Seattle, Washington, so the attention turned to him. The day Andrie met her paternal aunts, their Seattle brother was on the phone as part of their connection. When he heard the story, he suggested he could be her birth father, but nothing was proven. Andrie's husband at the time suggested she do a DNA test with the second man to see if maybe he was the guy. So she called him up to ask if he would agree to submit a DNA sample.
And he said, absolutely. And then we started talking on the phone a lot. And before the results even came back, he just came out and said to me, he says, "You know what? Who cares what those results says? I'm just going to claim that you're my daughter."
Wow.
And
How was that to hear?
it was a little unnerving at the time because I was like, I really want to know. Now I really want to know who my birth father is, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And the results came back, and sure enough, he was my birth father.
Wow. That is
Yeah.
crazy. How
Yes.
how is that? Did you call him? Who got the results first, and how did you sort of?
I I got the results because we did an ancestry DNA test, and I set the whole thing up. I had the test sent to him, and he did the test and sent it in. And so, because I created the account, the results came to me. So I got the results first. And I called him and told him, I said, "Well, I have some good news. You're my you're my biological father."
Wow.
Yeah, that was in August of 2019.
That is
And I,
crazy.
yeah, found out that at that time I found out I had two brothers. I had a brother that was 2 years younger than me, and then a brother that's the same age as my youngest nephew slash son that I raised.
Hmm.
So I set this visit up to go out to Seattle to visit him. And oh man, I will never forget this. 2 weeks before flying out to Seattle, I started to have a nervous breakdown.
Really?
And yeah, I was like, okay, I need to find a therapist. I need to talk about this because for 47 years, I had been suppressing all of this. Like, how I was coping with it, like coping it with the lies, coping with it with just not dealing with it, not even thinking about it. But when now this Pandora's box has opened, everything started coming out. And I was going to meet this person who actually was from my hometown that I really did not know, but I knew his family. And I felt like I was about to lose my mind. I felt very overwhelmed with feelings that I didn't know what to do with them. Like, I didn't know where to place them. And I went out, I got a therapist like 2 weeks before, and it was just enough for me to get to Seattle to deal with what's going on in Seattle and then come back and start dealing with all of this stuff, which was a saving grace. And I still see the same therapist till this
Oh
day.
yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
that
Well, a
person
lot has
gained a lot of
happened.
trust with you just being there from
Oh,
that very
yes.
challenging moment, right?
Oh, yes,
Wow.
absolutely. Yeah.
So what was the trip out there? Tell me about your visit.
Well, it was very emotional, very, very emotional. I found out that I had two other brothers, and one of the two other brothers had just told the two brothers that I knew about that they existed. So they came out.
Wow.
They weren't adopted, but they were my biological father had these two boys in between my brother that's 2 years younger than me and my brother that is the same age as my youngest. And they had the same mother. And this one brother pretty much came to my brothers and let them know that they have two other brothers. So all of this was happening at the same time. Like,
Wow.
I found my biological father, and these two brothers of mine came out and told my brothers that they existed. And then this brother found out that you have a sister who was
Dang.
adopted. Yes. Yeah.
That is a
There's,
lot all at once for
yes.
everybody.
Yes, exactly. So,
Wow.
so that trip to Seattle was really, really, really emotional. Like, there was a lot of feelings from my brothers, and just a lot. It was very heavy,
Yeah.
very heavy.
How did you get
Yeah.
along with your biological father when you were there in person?
We got along great. I found out some things about him that wasn't favorable. I'm probably not going to talk much about that. We
Hmm.
could talk about that later.
I understand.
Yeah. Found out some things about him that kind of goes against who I am. That doesn't sit well with me.
I understand.
So, yeah, it was very interesting. Very interesting. He showed me a lot of attention, but then at the same time, he has this son that pretty much told the brothers that he existed, and found out that my biological father knew that these brothers existed as well. He
Mm.
knew. He paid child support for them for years, and but never had a relationship with them.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so that didn't sit well with me. I couldn't understand it because I come from a family that fathers took care of their kids. That's what I saw. I never saw fathers not taking care of their children. My dad took care of us. I don't know what life is without a dad. And I can't imagine that these two boys grew up not having a relationship with him. And he knew that they existed. And he didn't even share that with my other two brothers that
Yeah.
he potentially raised.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things that was very unsettling,
Yeah.
and
It's
very
funny.
emotional.
Yeah, I could imagine. It is unsettling. And it's funny. There's several things that can go right or wrong with a reunion, and it can be your personality alignment, it can be
Mhm.
your political alignment or misalignment,
Right.
it can be
Right.
religious, and in this
Right.
case, moral, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it's just fascinating to sort of dissect the different ways that this can go right or wrong. And
Right.
the moral one is not one that comes up very often, but I can see how
Mhm.
impactful it is in trying to make sure that you are, in fact,
Right.
aligned with these people that you found. Andrie said that in the midst of the heaviness, there were some beautiful outcomes from the reunion in Seattle. She gained 4 brothers, some of whom she has some unique things in common with, like their shared love for shoes. She said it must be in their blood because she and some of her brothers are just obsessed with shoes. Andrie said that what comes next is her favorite part of her story. The same year as her paternal reunion, she was doing some more super sleuthing, trying to locate her birth mother. In Ancestry DNA, once you identify one of your biological parents, the door is unlocked for you to peek into the rest of the family tree for that person and see all of your relatives on their side of the family. Ancestry DNA had done so for Andrie's paternal connections, so she needed to focus on her biological mother's side of the family. One of her second cousins shared that a family historian had a whole family tree that might be helpful. When Andrie spoke with this distant cousin, he said he might know who her biological mother was, but he wasn't sure. However, he gave her enough information that she was able to focus her search. On Facebook, Andrie found some of her family members.
I found some cousins, and then I found this picture of my biological mother and her husband on Facebook. And I remember looking at that picture, and I instantly knew that this lady was my biological mother.
Wow.
It gave me goosebumps. I said, this has to be her. I was like I was looking in the mirror and looking back at myself. But this particular cousin didn't get back with me. He hadn't let me know who he thought was my biological mother. Then I get an email in Ancestry DNA from this person, and he said that my biological mother's mother, which is my grandmother, had a child, and she gave that child up for adoption. And this person was reaching out to me.
I understand.
But at the time when he was reaching out to me, I only had suspicions. I wasn't 100% sure who the biological mother was. So I had an idea from looking at a Facebook picture, but I wasn't 100% sure. So when he reached out to me, I was like, okay, who is this person? So I reached out to that cousin, the family historian, and I said, okay, I just got a message from this person, and he is saying that he's my family. He is saying that this person is his mother, and I'm a little confused. So he said, hold on, I'm going to make a phone call, and then I will get back with you. 45 minutes later, he calls me back, and he tells me the person that I looked at on that Facebook page is my biological mother. He told me, he said the name and everything, and that the person that reached out to me is my biological uncle.
Wow. That must have been mind-blowing to think, one, as you've said, like you've seen her picture and you're looking at yourself in the mirror, basically.
Right.
But two, like to contemplate that there was multi-generational adoption in your biological family as well. Must have been really wild to consider.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a whole nother emotional roller coaster, part of the Pandora's box, opening up more and more and more. Yes. Like everything coming out of that Pandora's box. Yeah. Yeah, it was very interesting. So found out who my biological mother was, confirmed that the lady that I looked at on that picture on Facebook is my biological mother. And she wasn't quite ready to talk to me because she wasn't 100% sure. And the reason was because she did not know the person who I was saying was my biological father.
She wasn't positive it was him.
She didn't know him. She doesn't know him. That's what she said. Yeah. And to this day, she still doesn't know him. She has no recollection of him at all. So she had to wrap her mind around it. So this is like the second time that I felt a little bit of abandonment. Like, okay, she knows that I exist, but she doesn't want to talk to me, So I was a little hurt behind that. I was like, okay. But she told that cousin who was an historian that every year on my birthday, she would say something about me. And she'd say, I wonder what my daughter is doing. My birthday matched the day that she gave birth, but the father didn't match in her head. So she wasn't 100% sure. So then her husband saw my picture on Facebook and said, "That is your daughter.
Wow.
That is your daughter."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Wow.
because
That's
we
unreal.
look just alike.
Mm, mm, mm.
Yes, we look just alike.
What was it
Yeah.
like to see that? Because you've said that you didn't look like your adoptive parents, even though you are biracial and they are black, you are people of
Mm-hmm.
color. You still
Right.
said you were fair, and it sounds like they were at least
Oh, yeah.
brown or darker skinned. How
Yeah.
was it to actually
Yeah.
see somebody, and how was it to see somebody who you actually looked like, even if you weren't necessarily, for lack of better words, the same race?
Right. Well, yeah, well, I had the experience to look at my brothers and see myself in my brothers
Mm-hmm.
because I look like them as well. Like we have some similarities. So I had that experience. But the experience to see my biological mother for the first time was mind blowing. It was very cathartic in a way, and it's hard to put in words. It's really hard to put in words. It was questions being answered that I had when I was growing up, like like thinking about who do I look like? Where did I get this height from? Where did I get this, these freckles that I have on my face from? Just certain things. But then to see it, actually see it,
Mm-hmm.
because I look just like her. I mean,
Unreal.
the only difference between us is I'm taller and she's shorter. That's the only difference. And she has blonde hair and I have dark hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but
Mm-hmm.
I look just like her. And I remember when I actually got to see her for the first time face to face. She had showed me a picture of her when she was 18 years old. And I had a picture that was very similar to that when I was like 20 something years old, and we look exactly alike.
Andrie and her birth mother have similar personalities, and she said there's a lot of nature between them. They share feminist values. They're both diehard Chicago Cubs fans. They like the same kinds of historical stories. They love the same TV shows. And Andrie said sometimes conversations with her birth mother are like talking to herself. She said her birth mother is very sweet, and the woman and her husband, Andrie's bonus father, are just amazing people. But we've blown right past how Andrie and her birth mother ever met. The woman's sister, Andrie's maternal aunt, and the woman's husband, Andrie's bonus father, were both pushing her birth mother to call Andrie. She finally did. The women were on the phone together for a long time.
I remember hearing her voice for the first time, and it felt like I heard that voice before.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
That's
I remember that.
that's
Yeah.
unbelievable. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was it
It's
comforting?
very comforting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I was in tears, obviously. I was at work when she called. I had to go in the conference room and close the door. And I remember I had goosebumps when I heard her voice for the first time.
Wow.
Well, to me, for the second time, because
Mm-hmm.
I obviously heard it for 9 months and I recognized her voice. It was like I heard this voice before. That is the feeling that I got. Yeah. It's like I know this voice. I was blown away.
Right after their reunion occurred, the pandemic kept Andrie and her birth mother separated. Talking about their connection, Andrie also shared this.
I didn't tell you this part. She is from my hometown. She lives in my hometown where I grew up.
Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes. As a matter of fact, she lived in pretty much the same neighborhood that I lived in.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that is crazy.
Worked at the same grocery store that my family grocery shopped at.
Are you serious?
Yeah, very serious.
Wow, like
Yeah,
at a time frame that she was young enough that she would have been one of the young employees that your own mother was passing by
right,
with the grocery cart kind of thing, your family.
right.
Wow,
Absolutely.
that is
Yes.
nuts.
Yeah. And I'm such a friendly person. I never meet a stranger. I talk to anybody. I don't care who you are. I just talk. And and I probably talked to her and didn't even know, or as a young kid,
Mm,
or maybe talk to my biological grandmother or my biological aunt, and I just don't remember.
yeah. Well, because you
Or we
didn't know,
probably,
you know?
yeah, probably
Surreal.
passed each other. Yeah, very close, very close. Like, I was thinking I was born in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Well, I found out she had me at an unwed mother's place, and
Mhm.
she was forced to give me up for adoption. It was a choiceless situation.
Mm.
And it is so funny. Before I met her, I had read this book called Choiceless by a mother who gave her baby up for adoption at the same place that my mother was at
Oh,
a
really?
year before my biological mother was at.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
crazy. Wow. Of all
yeah,
the places you
yeah,
could have read about, it was the same place.
same place. And
Wow.
I remember when I was reading the story, you heard me say that I'm a super sleuth. I'm like digging for research and research, trying to find information. When I was doing more information on Booth Memorial, the unwed mother's place, I found this person who wrote this book who had a child at the same place. It's called Choiceless. And I actually ended up talking to her
Hmm.
before I went out to meet my biological father. And I actually call her my soul mother now. We're really good friends now. So
That's really
I
cool.
read that book.
Mm.
Yeah, I read that book. So I got a glimpse into what my biological mother's story was like for her. Very similar story. Very, very similar. She had a biracial child. She was forced to give that child up for adoption. And she had a reunion with her daughter. And my biological mother, a year later, after she was there, had me there at the same place. So I had some empathy and compassion because of that. I read that book
Hmm.
because going into this reunion, knowing what she went through, what she probably was feeling at the time. And then once I talked to her, it confirmed that same feelings that Ruby was having. This is the person who wrote the book, that my biological mother had those same feelings. And she remembers telling them that she was not going to give her baby up for adoption, and
Hmm.
then being told that she had no other choice. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unreal.
Yeah. Hmm.
How's your relationship now then?
Oh, it's great.
That's good.
I love her so much. Oh my gosh, I love her so much. I really do. I can't imagine my life without her right now. So,
That's amazing. Talking about her biological father, Andrie said she barely speaks with the man. He wants the relationship with her, but she chooses to maintain boundaries with him because of how she feels. Andrie admits she would have to get to a place where she's reconciled those feelings in order for them to have a relationship at all. When I asked Andrie how she shared her reunion story with her biological family, she reminded me that she was nearly 50 years old when she submitted her sample on Ancestry DNA. Andrie called her adoptive mother to share what she was doing, which, ironically, opened her adoptive mother up to talking about her own experience adopting Andrie.
this is the first time that she ever did that,
Hmm.
because before she wouldn't talk about any of it. And she kind of told me about when she got me, it was told to her that my biological mother had 3 months to change her mind. And she said for those 3 months, it was like the worst time of her life because she was afraid that somebody was going to come knocking at the door to take me back. Then the adoption process happened and I was permanently hers. And then she talked to me about some of the things that her friends was saying, like when my sister was born, like, how can you love these other two children and you have your own baby now? And my mother said, because these are my babies.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me all about that. And that's part of the unconditional love that I got from her, the nurturing that I got from her. She taught me what unconditional love looks like and what it feels like, because that's what she has. So, but it was, I told her about me going out to meet my biological father, told my dad, and my dad was okay with it. My dad was like, I know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how my dad acts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He knows he knows he's my dad, and he was okay with it. My mother wasn't so much, because she just, didn't really want to deal with this part of the story. So in the beginning, I kept a lot of information from her. Like when I found my biological mother, I didn't tell her a lot about that. And when I actually had the reunion with my biological mother, I didn't tell my mom. And I told her later,
Mm-hmm.
because I was, like I told you, I was dealing with walking in my truth with my therapist. And that was part of me walking in my truth, that I
Mm-hmm.
had to let her know this is what I've done. And she still has a little bit of a hard time with it. And she became very territorial. Like I noticed that she was doing things a lot more than what she normally was doing. Like it kind of treating me like a child almost. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to remind her, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And you're not going anywhere either.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to remind her how much I love her. So I think that those feelings is almost like PTSD. Those feelings came back up, like I could possibly lose my daughter,
Oh,
but
yeah.
she's not. I'm not going anywhere. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she's one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
That's good, though. That
yeah.
you're right to reassure her that you're not going anywhere. But I could see how if there was a time in her life when she thought a knock at the
Hmm.
door could be the,
Right.
you know, unfortunate end of your relationship, it would
Right.
certainly stand to reason that she would have PTSD from that, and to learn that you were searching for the person who
Right.
she was fearful from in the first place, 30, 40
Right.
years ago. I could see how that would be really tough. Yeah. But
Right.
you sound like you
Right.
did a wonderful job of sort of, you know, hugging her, right? Letting her
Yes.
know that you're
Yes.
there and comforting
Yes.
her to know that you're not going anywhere. And that's an
Right.
important thing.
Right.
And it's a funny thing. I'm thinking of, as parents, that's what we do for our children, right? You
Hmm.
comfort them, you
Right.
let them know they're going to be okay. You're not going
Right.
anywhere. And it's interesting as we get to be adults how that changes. And you end
Right.
up in many ways comforting and caring for your own parents in a variety of different
Right.
ways. And some of them
Oh
are
yeah.
emotional. So that's really interesting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, we had normal family dysfunctions. I hate to try to put some normalcy on family dysfunction, but to me, every family has
Yeah,
this
it's
some type of dysfunction,
That's
you
right.
know?
That's right.
Yes.
I mean, there's no
So,
there's no two people who are alike, and so there's always some relationship challenge. And
right.
it's
Right.
mother daughter, it's mother son, it's father son, and it's
Right.
sibling. It doesn't matter who it is.
Right.
There's going to be some strife, and we all have
Right.
like the things that we're great at and the things that we need to work on personally. And it can be
Right.
everything from
Exactly.
how we learned to love, and therefore how we give love to our kids, to
Right.
things like alcoholism and substance abuse. Like there's any
Right.
variety of things that will make a family life
Right.
challenging. So I think you're right. There's some dysfunction in every family, be they
Family.
biological or adopted. I'm with you
Right.
100%.
Exactly. But one thing that I'm most grateful for, and it's not that I'm grateful because they a lot of people tell adoptees that you should be grateful that you had somebody that wanted you and blah blah blah. That same story that people who don't understand say. it's not about that for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about me being appreciative of the people who adopted me. No, I'm appreciative of the parents who loved me.
Mm,
That's what I'm appreciative of.
love
Who
that.
cares? Yeah, who
Yeah.
cares about the adoption? These people, and still to this day, loves me. They've been behind me 100% of the way. My mom would say, when I told her that I found my biological mother, she says, well, I'm the one that saw you walk your first walk. I'm the one that when you were crying about something, I was there. And she's right. She is the one. She
Yep.
was the one. And that will never be replaced. And I love her. She's my mom. But I also have this biological mother that I absolutely adore too.
Yeah.
So I feel like I got the greatest blessing that I'm able to have two mothers and now two fathers, and then I'm speaking about my bonus father, my
Mm-hmm.
biological mother's husband.
Yeah.
I have two fathers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my bonus father, he fathers me in a way that he doesn't even know that he's fathering me sometimes. It's amazing because like sometimes we'll have conversations and I'm like, he just fathered me.
Did I just get dadded? That's funny.
Right.
That's great. I love to hear that.
Yeah.
That's really, really awesome,
Yeah.
Andrie. And I'm glad to hear the laughter in your voice, because it sounds like there were some challenging times in there in terms of
Oh yeah.
what you had, sort of sat with and faced with
Yeah.
your biological father. But it sounds like there's so much great stuff around
Oh,
that,
yes.
and that you have chosen to put up the boundary that says, that's not what I'm dealing with here.
Right.
It sounds like you're in a really
Right.
healthy place, and I love to hear that. And I'm glad to hear that you got the love that you did. That's really cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here, Andrie. This was really cool, and thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care. All the best to you, all right?
Okay.
Hey, it's me. Andrie coped with the rejection she felt as a child by making up stories about where her birth family really was. Stories about where her birth family really was. She carried those fabricated stories into her marriage, but finally decided to own her story. Unfortunately, Andrie has problems with the choices her birth father has made in life, so until she is able to get past his moral choices, she chooses to keep her distance from the man. In reunion, huge moral differences are a hard thing to overcome, even when someone is trying to be a different person and make amends for past transgressions. Sometimes the voice in your head just keeps repeating your internal struggle with the other person, so letting them get close to you just isn't possible. Fortunately, her love for her birth mother is strong, and the women have a lot in common. I loved hearing Andrie say she couldn't imagine her life without her birth mother. That's the kind of feeling so many adoptees wish they could feel. I'm Damon Davis, and I hope you found something in Andrie's journey that inspired you, validates your feelings about wanting to search, or motivates you to have the strength along your journey to learn, who am I really? If you would like to share your story of adoption and your attempt to connect with your biological family, please visit whoamireallypodcast.com/share. You can follow me on Instagram at Damon L. Davis and follow the podcast at WAI Really. If you like the show, please take a moment to leave a 5-star review in your podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts. It's easy to do, and the ratings really do help others to find the podcast too.